we have not used the pension system as we ought to drive sustainable development.
You're welcome to the Economy and Politics Conversation. I'm Ottoabasi Abasiekong. This edition will be looking at developing a viable and inclusive Nigerian pension industry. With me to have this conversation is Mr. Opeyemi Agbaje, who is now appointed as the acting chairman of the National Pension Commission, also known as Pencom, the board. It's great to have you, Mr. Opeyemi Agbaje, and congratulations on your nomination by His Excellency President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, the GCFR. On the sidelines of this MSME, inaugural MSME Finance CEO Forum 2025, you were the keynote speaker, and you said very clearly that the pension industry in Nigeria should not be looked at as a fixed income market, but as a driver of development. Can you expand a bit on that, considering what's happening in US, UK, and South Africa, developed pension industry?
You know, in the first 20 years of the contributory pension system, we focused, I think, correctly on safety of the system. So the consequence of that was that most of the funding was into federal government, treasuries, treasury bills, bonds, securities, fixed income securities, which are relatively safe. But one of the consequences of that, given inflation and devaluation of the currency, is that the real value of our pension savings has diminished drastically with the recent, even over the years, as the currency devalued and inflation continued. So the first point is that we have not used the pension system as we ought to drive sustainable development through investments in infrastructure, investments in real estate and housing and mortgages, developments that will be an accelerator of national development. That's one. Two, the pensioners have lost a significant percentage of their savings. We can solve both problems. However, we must never compromise the safety. So the challenge for us and for the stakeholders in the industry is that how can we bring forward new instruments that will flow into those areas of development and at the same time build risk management systems around them such that nothing happens to pensioners. It's a win-win for everybody. The pensioner will get his results, the country will develop, MSMEs will have better infrastructure and better. So that's the thinking that I have expressed. Of course, there's still a lot of work to be done at the commission, with the industry stakeholders, even with the National Assembly, to advance those into a concrete implementable system. But I'm certainly committed to those outcomes, the national development, inclusiveness, but a sustainable and sustained pension system.
Returns in terms of investment on pensions has been low compared to what we see in the fixed income market. How can that be changed to create value as we see in other markets?
We know the basic investment rules. There's a trade-off between risk and return. And the mindset of the pension industry in its first 20 years, and like I said, you build a foundation, then you can then build after the foundation. So in designing the foundation, the focus has been on safety. So we're focused on minimizing risk. When you focus on minimizing risk, invariably, you also minimize returns, and so that has been the trade-off. So the asset allocation guidelines that the industry has offered players have tended to minimize it's always been on the safety threshold, and therefore the returns have been, and so we need, so even in terms of equity investment, they've not done much of that. The allocations to equity have been very low, and so on. So I don't suggest that these are easy things. We're going to have to be careful. Like I said, we want to improve returns, but we also must not sacrifice safety and sustainability of the pension fund. So that's my sense.
Now let's look at expanding the coverage and compliance. And let me take an example. Teachers, a lot of private schools, private schools particularly, the teachers don't have pension coverage. I don't know how the compliance of Pencom is in ensuring that this is done, because I know several teachers I interact with that don't have pension, which is not something that is acceptable. The same with market women, artisans. We've heard a lot about micro pensions. So what's the prospect of expanding this compliance and coverage and bringing in the micro pension? Because you are so big on inclusive economy and inclusive industry.
I know from the conversations I've had, my initial conversations at the Pencom, that even before my coming, the current management at the fund, at the commission, is already focused on this. And they're examining options. I totally agree with you. Not just from the compliance angle, but from the opportunity angle. The opportunity, if we get millions of the informal sector people, millions of teachers in all those schools all across Nigeria who are not yet in the fund. Essentially, it is government and the formalized, leading corporate sector that has complied with the Pencom. Look at the opportunity for the industry. If we, not necessarily through compliance holding sticks, but presenting the opportunity to the industry. This is the amount, you could double your industry. You could double your PFA size if you can get these, just like the banks. They looked at retail banking as a problem before, but now they see it as an opportunity and they compete for it. So I would want us to take, at the Pencom and at the PFAs and PFCs, we want to look, what's the size of the opportunity? If we got all the private schools in Nigeria to do modest pension schemes for their employees, look at it. If we got all the market women associations and market men, traders, artisans to subscribe to personal pensions, we currently call it micro pension, but we will, maybe going forward we'll call it personal pensions, and just to encourage the industry to focus on this, and perhaps that process we could double our industry. We could at least grow it if it's just by 50%, given the size of our informal economy, given the size of MSMEs, which we know, as we have just discussed there, is 48% of our GDP. How much of MSMEs are subscribed currently? Maybe less than 5%. So we intend to focus on that, expanding the industry, getting all the informal people, as much of them as possible, into the scheme. Yes, advancing the existing micro projects, and perhaps holding the PFAs to account for their performance in that segment of the market. Those would be some of the things we would be trying to advance in the commission.
So let's look at those areas you highlighted, which is the concern of the whole industry and Nigerians: investing in infrastructure, catalyzing environment where we can see more activities in mortgage, housing, and other opportunities to unlock economic activities. What should we be expecting as we begin to interact with the management?
I will not
preempt.
Okay. The board of the Pencom makes decisions. Yes. We will get there. But what's the direction of our thinking? That's what I'm going to focus on. And the direction of our thinking is that we have to have our asset allocation formulas. It will be optimal if they allow some significant space for investments in infrastructure, in mortgages, real mortgage-backed securities, maybe also private equity. But the idea is that we must create instruments that are rateable so that we can have objective criteria for measuring the safety and the sustainability of these instruments. So that means we'll need some work with the rating agencies, with the industry, with investors in those areas. But those will be the kind of principles I am looking forward to. So somebody independent has to, because we don't also want to lose pension funds. Somebody independent and credible has to work on a fund, a proposal, anybody who seeks to access the scheme, and we have to come up with some way by which we determine, and we have to monitor and be sure that this works. So we'll probably do a test, a pilot, and be sure that this is working before but the principle is that if we want to develop our economy, if we see where our economy is in terms of infrastructure, transportation, aviation, road infrastructure, power, then we can't pile up trillions of naira and leave the country undeveloped. So, and it's not also, you see, those also have significant returns, potentially. So, real estate returns attempt to match inflation. So that's a hedge against inflation. And infrastructure returns, look at if there was a bond around the MMA2 and they could access. So those are the kind of things I see. So, but we must create instruments, market-ready instruments, secure instruments, rateable instruments that allow us to do that in a sustainable manner.
As we wrap up, the goal is to achieve a $1 trillion GDP by 2030. And current size of our pension industry is around 23-24 trillion. And we need to even double it.
24.6
So we need to double that. I mean, look at the UK. I know that it's developed market, £1 trillion plus in terms of the size. That's where our GDP needs to be. But what must we do? Do we anticipate further reforms? What must we do to really push the needle?
I have been thinking about that. And that's not necessarily just pensions.
Yeah.
The country must consolidate current reforms and ensure we are seeing the outcomes we desire. What are the outcomes we desire from the fuel subsidy removal? A deregulated and market-driven downstream petroleum sector that is free and competitive. Well, virtually there. But we should just make sure we continue to invest, to see investment in the sector. Same with the upstream. We have succeeded in catalyzing investments in the upstream for the first time in decades. But now we must keep that sustained. So first of all, secondly, dealing with the negative side effects of the reforms, with empowering people, with credit economy, with NEL fund, and more. I want to see schemes for skills and competencies for the unemployed, for people who are poor, just to assuage the social consequences of the reforms, continuously investing in poverty alleviation. We must continue to work on inflation to come down. Now, once we have done that, those three, we should now move to other sectors. Mining. I would like to see action on mining sector reform that leads to investment in the sector, continuous investment in infrastructure, and Pencom has a role to play, but other entities also have roles. What should be our target for infrastructure? We want private investment in infrastructure. The government is driving so much fiscal resources towards towards infrastructure. But it would ease the fiscal risks if we can stimulate private sector investment in infrastructure to complement government spending. The National Integrated Infrastructure Master Plan provided that about 48% of investment in infrastructure, for us to meet the gap in infrastructure, has to come from the private sector. We have not performed in that regard. So that has to be a key objective. We must work on generating mass employment. I think agriculture, construction, retail are some of the sectors that we have to focus on to generate employment, to take our youth into the workforce. So I see reforms going beyond FX and petroleum subsidies and moving into other economic sectors. Exports should be a great area of attention. We have an opportunity with the exchange rate system. We need to galvanize exports and begin to improve, to diversify our sources of foreign currency. Those would be some of my suggestions. There must be others, but I would stop at those for now.
Thank you very much, Mr. Opeyemi Agbaje, now the acting chairman of the National Pension Commission, also known as Pencom. We also anticipate your confirmation by National Assembly
By the
and get
grace
to
of
work
God.
with the management and board of Pencom. Very interesting conversation on looking at how we can achieve an inclusive and viable Nigerian pension industry. I like what you said. Pension industry must move beyond being a fixed income market to a driver of development, and that's what we'll be tracking in the days to come. Thank you once again for
Thank you very much. My pleasure to be here.
So our viewers, that will be all for this conversation on the economy and politics program. If you want to get further insights on this conversation, log on to our website displayed on the screen and also follow our social media platforms. So we come your way again. I'm Ottoabasi Abasiekong. Thank you for watching and bye for now.